I'm Tim Ventura from AmericanAntiGravity.com, and I'm speaking today with Paul Moller, the inventor of the Moller SkyCar. Well, Paul, I want to start out by thanking you for your time today, as well as for the decades of inspiration that you've provided for everyone with an interest in VTOL solutions to our ever-increasing traffic problems. The Moller.com website indicates that you built your first SkyCar, the XM2, in 1962. I was wondering if you could start out by telling us a bit about the early years of your project.
Well, early on, I was actually building vertical takeoff aircraft that operated very close to the ground. And that's usually governed by the fact that you don't have the power to really leave the ground by more than a foot or two. So much of what I did through the 1960s and early 1970s was around vertical takeoff aircraft, as we do today, but they were pretty limited in what they could do for any distance above the ground.
So these would be a little bit like the Avrocar then, right?
Yeah, that was a really good example. They were really modeled. The first one was modeled very closely after the Avrocar, and it looked a little bit like it, although the Avrocar was a bit more streamlined.
Well, the M400 SkyCar uses multiple Rotax engines to create both lift and forward thrust in a manner similar to the Harrier fighter jet. Now, this is actually your newest model SkyCar and gets about 20 miles per gallon for fuel efficiency. Can you give us a few details on kind of the state of the art in terms of performance, fuel economy, and maybe some of the other things that really make this technology so amazing?
Well, really what we use is, you said Rotax. I think you probably meant rotary engines. They're actually the engines that we have developed called rotor-power engines. They're built on or designed around the Wankel principle, much as like used in the Mazda car.
Sure.
That is, of course, the key element to making this whole thing work, because you need very small, very powerful engines that fit in a particular way in the vehicle to make them work. And so engines and their performance and efficiency, size and weight really determine the SkyCar's success or failure. That's the key element. The SkyCar itself is a combined hybrid vehicle, so to speak, because it's an aircraft on one hand, a helicopter in another, and it's a road vehicle, not a high-speed road vehicle, but one that gets you around at the other end of the spectrum.
Oh, okay. Well, one of my own pet questions really regards solving the business challenges behind new transportation technologies. And in essence, you've been building working VTOL aircraft for over 40 years, yet it's still been a challenge to bring these to market. Can you describe some of the business and regulatory hurdles that you've already overcome and possibly some of the ones that still remain to be solved?
Well, the SkyCar is only viable in a broad sense if it has a skyway. It's like, the automobile at the turn of the century didn't have a lot of use if you didn't have highways. Well, we're at that point today where we really don't have a practical way of putting vehicles like the SkyCar into the air so that you and I can use them. You really need a highway in the sky which is so automated that you're not flying the vehicle, you're just sitting there playing computer games, reading, sleeping, doing whatever, and being delivered from point A to B. I don't think you or I or most people want to be up in that air when it's filled with vehicles controlled by perhaps inexperienced people, drunk people, old people, whatever, people who are not necessarily pilots in the true sense. I want a world where I'm on a skyway up there, automated, going from point A to point B of my own choice when I want to go there. And that's what's needed to make the SkyCar a viable product. Certainly we can demonstrate right now that we have a very well-working vehicle, but that vehicle is only going to work when it's got a highway to work on.
Oh, okay. Well, in my own experience, I grew up in a farm town, and one of my first impressions after I moved into the Seattle metro area really was, how can human beings possibly adapt to such horrible ground traffic conditions? And, I thought that over time I'd get used to it, but surprisingly, traffic always seems to get worse faster than we can adapt. I'm wondering how the Moller SkyCar can solve this problem.
Well, that really is what it can do best, because if you can automate that world, you can't really automate highways. You can't make cars, 5 feet apart, every direction going at different speeds. They've looked at it, they've talked about the technology, but, if you have a flat tire in the middle of that kind of world, how do you get rid of that car and get it out of the traffic? It's going to screw everything up immediately. In the world I'm talking about, where you have a few skyways or, maybe a large number of skyways, up there. If you have something go wrong, you get off the skyway, and it's easy to get off the skyway, and it's easy to get off that lane that's up there and come down and repair your vehicle if that's what you need to do. So it's really possible with a sky car in a way that would never be possible with the automobile. A world of skyways and sky cars is a very viable traffic scenario, and it's one that's guaranteed to come whether we did it or not.
Absolutely. Well, you'd mentioned how do you get a car off the road if it has a problem, and that reminded me of my early experience. When I first moved to Seattle, it was actually through AT&T Wireless. They had moved us up to the area as specialists to work on a project. And for my first 3 months here, I'd actually been commuting 80 miles each way, so it was 160 miles a day, down to Olympia before we were able to move up. And, it was kind of, in some ways, an interesting commute, I guess. I got to see a lot of sights along the way, but some of those sights were really amazing. And one of the things that stuck with me was we'd have 5-lane highways down in the Federal Way area, and they would have burning cars that the police cruisers be pushing off to the side of the road just to get traffic to move. And some of the things there, it was almost like it's like things you're not supposed to see in America. I remember we got stuck once next to a row of body bags on the freeway that the police just didn't have anywhere to put them.
It's a very terrifying. If you really think about driving down the highway today, I mean the 2-lane highway system has helped a lot, but much of the roads today are still, you're driving in the opposite direction of somebody who's going 80 miles an hour, and you're going 80 miles an hour or something less than that perhaps, but the closing speed is still well over 100. And you're talking about some guy that probably doesn't have a driver's license or is an illegal alien or God knows what, driving on the other side of the road. It's a pretty scary world we operate in. If we automate that world and do what we can do, after all, we sent a man to the moon and back, and the most exotic stability system in the world, and we got him back safely every time. So we certainly can route aircraft around above the Earth at a reasonable altitude and do it safely.
Sure. Well, part of making technologies like the SkyCar mainstream is getting the public to adopt them in place of the traditional commuter automobile or bus. Now, on a personal note, the pain, frustration, and literally loss of freedom associated with metro traffic really pushed me towards VTOL technologies, and I'm wondering, how long do you think it might be before the rest of our society really begins demanding these vehicles?
It's not going to be long, depending where you are. There's situations, for instance, Interstate 80, which I live on here. My projections that I've been studying it as a traffic engineer, I suppose, as a hobby even, to see where it's going and how fast it's getting there. And I say 3 to 5 years, and it's going to be a terminal highway. You will not be able to travel in any meaningful way on that highway system. It's come that way often right now. That's what's going to drive this. And when it becomes bad enough, we'll see the priorities, the governmental priorities change. After all, it's not the vehicle issue right now. It's the highway issue in the sky, and that takes government activity, talks to the FAA. It requires participation from a number of bureaucratic organizations. Those priorities are going to be driven by political interests, and political interests are going to come as a result of people who finally get too fed up with this, and they'll make an issue of it. So I would say in the next 5 years, you're going to see some major changes in national priorities, but it may be a little too late for a lot of areas.
One of the things that I think Moller really addresses with the SkyCar, is the aspect of personal freedom in America. And I guess that comes from really the ability to go where we want, when we want. And it's something that's been an intrinsic part of our culture since the dawn of the automobile age, in the early 20th century. There have been a lot of proposals recently for mass transit solutions, especially in the Seattle area. And these all involve kind of a loss of personal freedom because they mean getting on a bus, train, or aircraft, traveling between hubs instead of point to point. Do you think that Moller is really serving a larger social cause in terms of keeping our personal transportation free?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you really hit upon one of the most significant things. Not only will the SkyCar return us to that degree of freedom you had when I was a kid and you could drive anywhere when you wanted at any time, but it'll expand those opportunities enormously because not only will you drive there at 50 miles, you could drive there at 50 miles an hour when I was a kid, you can now go there at 300 miles an hour. So you're going to cover 5 to 6 times the distance. Plus, you're going to be able to go places you never could go. I mean, a car is very limited. It has to be on the highway. But if you're in the air, you can fly to the top of that mountain. You can go anywhere you can imagine in places that people rarely have ever been. It will change the way we know America, the way we know the world, because people will be going places they never dreamed of going. Only the explorers go now, or the adventurous people might go out there in those areas. You will have the opportunity to experience America, for example, as in a way that no one else has ever done.
Sure. Well, it also seems like it might reduce urban sprawl because instead of having to live, in an ever-expanding city limit, in order to get to work through traffic, it'll mean that people are able to commute. You could keep the hour-long commute, but live several hundred miles away, right?
Right, right. You could change. You would have much more choices on where you live, how you live. If you want a rural environment, you could really have a true rural environment and still get back into other areas very, very easily and very quickly.
Now, one of the things that you touched upon earlier was the requirement for extensive pilot training for conventional aircraft. Now, as I understand it, there's already an exception to this clause if the craft is self-navigating. So, will the Moller SkyCar use a computer to fly itself? And if so, will it still require a training course?
The sky car in the way it's going to be used in general, and again, that's that mass world where you have this personal freedom flying yourself where you want through a computer, of course. Yeah, you're not going to have a bunch of people up there flying around controlling this. A central computer network based upon GPS, together with uh, acronyms like WAS and LAS, Wide Area Augmentation System, Local Area Augmentation System. These are geostationary satellites that work together with GPS to make it possible to locate every man, woman, and child within 5 inches if they're in the air or even on the ground for that matter. It's a world of real opportunity. It does a lot of things that we can't even imagine today. Just the ability to know where everybody who's moving about is and who they are. You're not going to have terrorists crossing borders in certain ways because we're going to know that particular vehicle is authorized to cross that border. The ability to interdict drugs and other things. These are all going to become real possibilities with a sky car that not only can fly at high speed but can land vertically, something today that gives them great grief because the car, a plane that can fly fast is not normally one that can land vertically like the helicopter.
Absolutely. Well, the light aircraft control system is one of these control systems, right? One of the primaries, and then GPS system is another, isn't it? As kind of a backup system.
Well, they're codependent. I'm not. I don't think I would call a light aircraft system. That's an acronym that's given a number of different names, but I would. They do have what's called SATS, a Small Aircraft Transportation System out of NASA, which is in a broader term is called the free flight network, where you go by GPS from point A to point B rather than, as they do today in the airliners, go through a series of vectors, which use up a lot more mileage than they would like. So this is really centered around making airliners more efficient, but obviously it's the perfect system for us as it expands, and that's the world we're talking about, this GPS-based system that uses a lot of complementary support systems along with it.
Oh, absolutely. So it sounds like the computer technologies are really almost there then.
They're there for the sky car, and they're there for the highway in the sky. That's why I say 5 years, you won't recognize where we are today versus where we are then. It's going to be a major change. It's the new technology, it's the next technology. It's bioengineering expanded 10 times.
Absolutely. Well, I understand that you've already done, and I may be mistaken about this, but my understanding was that you've done some pre-selling for these vehicles to sustain kind of the development funds for the company. But I was wondering when they may become available for the general public and what the price range will be.
Well, the public will, certain individuals of the public, when obviously the first vehicles are going to cost more because it's a volume dependent issue. It's like the automobile until Henry Ford came along and started producing them like dollar bills. The automobile was really expensive. It really applies here. If the highway in the sky is there, everybody can fly, and then everybody's going to want to own one of these vehicles, and the price is going to come down. I think that's probably 10 years until that gets to that level of production, and in which case it'll be well under $100,000 price of a quality automobile. But it'll be more expensive between 3 years and 5 years as we produce modest numbers of these, and the highway in the sky is just beginning to be used.
Sure. Well, it sounds like that may actually be a good thing, though, because, the initial people who first start using these, to begin with, you'll have lower traffic volumes on the Skyway, so it'll help round out some of the technical bugs that may pop up. But I guess the other part is people are going to be a lot more careful with a $100,000, $200,000 vehicle than they would be with, say, your average, Honda Civic driving down the road.
Well, and of course, the initial people who are going to be flying these around as pilot, until you have that highway in the sky that's automated, you're going to have people flying around as we do today with helicopters and airplanes. But the SkyCar itself will still be so computer controlled that it'll be extremely easy to fly. I mean, I'm the test pilot right now with no significant training. It's a very easy thing to do to fly this machine.
Now, you actually have video on the Moller.com website of several test flights, and the M400 is up there, and I have to admit, it's just a gorgeous aircraft. I mean, it's cherry red. It's everything that you'd really want in a Sky car. One of the things I've noticed is these things are pretty noisy, though, aren't they?
Well, we haven't put any. We haven't. It's like you do things in order. We haven't made a lot of emphasis on the exhaust system, even though we were the world leader in exhaust silencing for many years and produced products that were sold all over the world. It's not an area we have been able to put a lot of money into because we obviously are putting money into the basic fundamentals of the vehicle itself. We will have a quiet package, I guarantee you, when it's ready for the market.
Oh, and again, that's probably 5 to 6 years then for the first one.
Well, three years you'll be able to buy a vehicle. My guess is it may be a paramilitary vehicle. It could be specialized user vehicle. 5 years is probably a better number for the average person who's got money, a fair amount of money, and 10 years for the average person.
Absolutely. Well, one of the focuses that American Anti-Gravity has had is on a lot of the electromagnetic and electrogravitational approaches to these technologies. Now, do you think that's something that Moller might consider down the line a ways, maybe a decade or two off, but as something to implement into more advanced airframes, I guess?
Well, if you had some of those systems, of course, you'd go back to the drawing board because so much of what we do is governed around the power plant. If you look at my vehicles through the years and see how they've sort of gone through a metamorphosis, that metamorphosis has been driven by the power plant. If you come up with a new kind of propulsion system, you're going to come up with a different kind of vehicle. I'd love to have controlled fusion and some of the other things that ultimately are going to make it possible to build very economical vehicles that anybody can own and fly and cost them almost nothing to do so. But for the next, my guess is on the basis of where we are today with anti-gravity and other things, that is still quite a long ways away, requiring a fairly significant breakthrough to be practical. But I have no doubt that something along that lines will come. Maybe in my lifetime, maybe not.
Sure. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the power plant because that's actually one of the design challenges with anti-gravity systems. And it's something that I think we can model after your solutions to it, which are really finding good conventional technologies to, in our case, provide electricity, or in your case, provide just motive power for impellers.
Yeah, of course. I mean, our engine is probably as I said, the key element to the SkyCar, and it might be the key element to electricity too, because we can produce much more power, electrical power, with our type of engine than almost anybody in the world.
Now, has anyone ever inquired about actually buying the engines just by themselves to build different, maybe one-off type prototypes for some designs?
Well, what they've done is we have letters of intent to purchase almost $1 billion in engines. That's 500,000 engines. That gives you some idea of the interest in the engine for any number of applications that we haven't. I'm not specifically referring to aircraft applications or perhaps use in anti-gravity applications, but for things like handheld power tools, for generators, for personal watercraft, for snowmobiles, for hybrid cars. Huge market. In China, for example, there's a tremendous interest in using this as one of the major engines of the future in the development of China. So we know that the engine is going to be our bread and butter for some time, and probably will be the thing that funds the SkyCar for some time if we don't get some outside support.
Sure.
Which seems quite difficult to do, by the way. Not many of the so-called people with money seem to have the vision to address this coming technology. technology.
Yeah, it has been interesting to watch events like the X Prize, which seem to launch directly into space and yet kind of bypass, I guess, the more down-to-earth concerns.
Yeah, I guess it's the exotic nature of it and the newness of it, and of course we have a little bit of a history here of flying cars being just around the corner for about 50 years. So that, not just ourselves, but everybody along the road has thought that flying cars could come quicker than they did. But without our engine, it really wasn't possible, and the engine is really what makes it all happen.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and it sounds like, from just the general interest that Moller seems to attract as a company, as well as the engine interest, you're really well positioned to be, in a sense, almost the next General Motors, except maybe a GM of the skies.
Well, let's say that there is a General Motors that'll probably come about as a result of our joining forces with some other entity. We're not in a position to generate a General Motors. I don't have enough of a lifetime left here to do that, but we certainly are prepared to license our technology or joint venture to find a strategic partner. We've talked to Boeing, and Boeing's done a lot of studies, but Boeing's got their own problems at the moment. We're talking to Raytheon. We're talking to a couple other significant aerospace companies, but we're also talking to the General Electrics of this world. And somewhere along the line, we will partner up with one of these companies, and that's the way it's going to come to market. We're an R&D company. We're not the kind of company that builds huge numbers of vehicles like the GMs and the GEs.
Oh, sure. Well, it seems like the military might also be interested in this. If nothing else, I've seen a lot of movies and TV where they're trying to squeeze those military helicopters into all sorts of tight spaces. A lot of it's in the city, and with those blades sticking out like they do, even if you just touch a city wall or something, it's gone. And
all gone. Yeah, you're darn right.
yeah, Moller seems like that, and it fits into a more normal street profile. So you can actually.
Oh, it does, and that's a very good point, and it's a point that we're trying to sell right now too. We can go and we can rescue somebody from the side of a building, a tall skyscraper, something that no vehicle ever before ours has ever been able to do. So that's a market that we're trying to penetrate as well. And the military has shown an interest as well in applications where, a medevac vehicle that could get some injured person out of the field very quickly, where that's so critical in today's world.
Sure. Well, and one of the applications, there's been kind of it's almost like a running joke here in the Seattle area, but we have these express lanes that are really meant for commuter vehicles, and they have a lot less traffic as a result, and then you have the other 4 lanes next to it where people are in a standstill during rush hour. And there have actually been a number of incidences with, high-paid tech employees or CEOs or, what have you, just the more wealthy aspect of our society, I guess, where despite the $300 ticket for having a single-person vehicle in the expressway, they'll actually risk that ticket because their time is valuable enough that it's worth it for them to pay the ticket and move on than to get stuck in traffic.
Right.
And one of the major challenges there, though, is parking, because a lot of these executives, no matter what kind of vehicle they're driving, at some point they have to pull into a garage. Now, is the SkyCar able to really be parked and maneuvered inside of an enclosed space like that?
Well, I think you have to think about a different world there. If you'd have a huge vertical parking lot, for example. You land on the top, and it just elevates the vehicle down and slides it into a slot because, of course, the wing's full, so the vehicle's no bigger than a car. Slide it down, goes down to center of the elevator, slides into a slot, and you drop down to the street and jump in an electric vehicle and go somewhere, leave it off and pick up another electric vehicle and go somewhere else when you come back from your meeting. It's a different world. It's a world that I think is not that far away, but the parking issue is in many ways simplified by the fact that you don't have to have huge numbers of parking spaces available everywhere. You can be quite locally centered and end up with a very small electric vehicle that you move around the city streets that certainly uses maybe 1/3 the space to park.
Oh, sure. Well, and one of the other advantages is, at least in our area, we have a lot of open-air garages on the top deck, and they usually have a lot of space because nobody wants to have to walk down 4 flights of stairs to get to the sidewalk below. So.
Oh, sure. That's a good place to start. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it sounds like everything is really going for this, and I'm really excited to see these things finally roll out. If for no other reason, it starts to really change the public perception. It starts to get people thinking three-dimensionally.
Yeah, I've always argued that the most unused natural resource we have in the world today is the airspace above us. If you think about it, you go outside, you're sitting down in traffic, and you look up above you, and all that space is available. Nobody's using it. It just needs the right kind of integration and infrastructure, and you'll be in a different world altogether.
Absolutely. Well, I'm all done with my questions, but if you have any closing comments for the audience, I would definitely love to hear anything you have to say.
No, I think that what if they just look at our internet site, they'll enjoy just browsing through that at Moller.com. It's easy to find, and it has a lot of other material on it that we haven't talked about today. And of course, we also have a freedom-motors.com, but they'll be linked to that if they go to Moller, and that'll tell you a lot about the engine. The engine is we're really excited about the engine. Obviously we're excited about the SkyCar, but the engine is such a key element to the whole process and is really a big part of our future in terms of growth. So that for us, the engine is a very exciting element of what's going on at the moment in our company.
Sure. Well, and again, the website is www.moller.com. That's MOLLER.com. And I want to thank you again for your time. It's been a wonderful experience.
Thank you. You're welcome.